Welcome everyone to day 2 of FCI Live. Thank you so much for being here with us. We are excited. We've got a topic today you have all been asking for and asking for and asking for. And we're not going to be able to cover everything. Let's give Noemi some breathing room here. Because this is 1 hour session, but we'll get into this conversation that I know there's been not enough information on. People have had a lot of questions about, and get a good start and figure out what else we need to discuss as a movement around data. So excited to have her here. I just want to real quickly thank our FCI Live champion sponsors. We have a bunch of sponsors this year. We're very grateful to them, but Colluminate and National Cooperative Grocers are our champion sponsors who have really made this series possible. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides here and talk a little bit about the session while Noemi gets set up. So Noemi Giszpenc is with the Cooperative Data Commons. This is what they do. They think about cooperatives and how we apply the cooperative principles and the cooperative way of business to data and data sharing. So we were very excited that she was willing and able to come out and talk about this. Now, if you're looking for the nitty-gritty details of exactly how I record my owner loans in this spreadsheet so then it can go into the data, the POS when we get, that's not this session, but you're going to get a lot of this session thinking big picture about how we use data, how we house data, that sort of thing. So I'm gonna let Noemi get her slides up here, but welcome to her. Thank you so much for being here today and taking on this topic with us.
Thank you, JQ. I really appreciate it. So let's see. I am going to share my screen and put up my slides. How does that look? All right, cool. And I can't see all of you, so I'm gonna rely on JQ to let me know what's going on in the chat, but please feel free to put in questions, and I have some questions for you too, so we'll be able to interact a little bit. And yeah, I am very pleased to be here, and thank you so much to FCI for inviting us and letting us share what we're doing. So let's go. What I wanted to cover today is basically just a brief introduction to the Data Commons Cooperative, so you can learn a little bit more about what we do, and then talk about you guys and data. So what do you need data for? Where do you get it? And how can we make that whole process more cooperative? And hopefully we'll have a chance for some Q&A at the end. So you have probably heard this many times, but the whole concept of cooperatives is that we can do more together, that we're stronger together. And that certainly informs what the Data Commons is about. It's, we're trying to do something together. And it particularly informs this presentation because as JQ mentioned, you had a bunch of questions that I wasn't really an expert on, so I reached out. I reached out to Cometrics, who has this great tagline, Strength in Numbers. I spoke with Rosemary Mahoney, who's a former CEO, and I spoke with Anthony Goodwin, who's a business innovation director at National Co-op Grocer. All mistakes are my own, so don't blame them. But if I say anything brilliant, it's probably something that I heard from one of them. So thank you to both of them. And yeah, let's get into it. So the Data Commons Cooperative is basically this idea of we want to get more done with less by sharing, as many of you also want to do. And the thing that we share is directory data. So basically, like, think of, the Yellow Pages type information, like who's out there, who's the co-op, what are they doing? And so it's very basic, very basic, especially compared to some of the data that you all are working with. But we are a cooperative of data sharing organizations. And I particularly enjoy our mission. It's to help our members collaboratively gather, share, maintain, display, and deploy information about the cooperative and solidarity economy. Those are like the 5 verbs. And we're mostly going to just talk about the first 2, gathering and sharing. But the idea is that we want to make all of these different things easier, cheaper, more enjoyable if possible, and ultimately more effective, so that we can actually do more, again, as a movement together. So that's what we do, and these are some of our members that participate. And one thing that I want to point out about the members of the Data Commons is that we are self-consciously trying to have a mix of larger organizations, like national organizations, sector organizations that are interested in a particular slice of the solidarity economy, as well as grassroots groups that are really paying attention to like one particular geographical area. So these are some of the what you see here, like Solidarity NYC. They are interested not just in co-ops, also in other solidarity organizations, but concentrated in the area of New York City. Same thing for Chi Commons. They're interested in Chicago. On the other hand, U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, they're interested in all worker cooperatives throughout the United States, and so on and so forth. So part of what we're doing as the Data Commons is thinking about the relationships between large sector organizations that have this very broad view and more on the ground grassroots organizations that have a very focused view, and they each have different resources at their disposal. Some might have more volunteer resources, others might have more financial resources. And how do we kind of build a bridge between those so that everyone is better off? So some of the projects that the Data Commons works on is sharing and displaying the directory data that our members share with us. So there is very old and out of date directory at find.coop. And, if anyone's ever interacted with a directory, I hope that you know that the minute that a directory is published, it starts to go out of date. In good ways, like, for example, all of you are, hopefully starting new co-ops and, need to be added to all these directories. Sometimes in sadder ways, if, somebody goes out of business, or just, in neutral ways, like, oh, somebody moved from this place to that place. But the point is that's the maintaining aspect that we want to make easier. So, if you look yourself up on find.coop and either you're not there or your information is out of date, let us know and we will take care of that. So that whole area of like, making that display work on find.coop and the sharing and maintaining that goes in the background, that's one area of work. A second area of work is creating and curating tools that make it easier. So thinking about, well, which data fields make sense for us all to gather. Okay, like year of founding, something like that. Or in the United States, like under what legal form did you form? Things like that. So trying to standardize those so that it's not just like, oh, whatever somebody thought of, and that's how it gets coded, and then it's like incompatible with anybody else's. How do we make those data fields something that helps us to share with one another, but also how can we make them something that really reflects who we are as cooperatives and as a solidarity movement? And that one of the interesting projects that we've been working on, for example, is industry classification. It's easier for some than others. Like a lot of food co-ops, retail grocery, boom, done. That's the industry classification. For other cooperatives, it can be a little bit more complicated to find your industry classification because, frankly, like the traditional and standard classification system used in the US and in many parts of the world comes from a hierarchical and extractive linear view of the economy. So it's a little bit subtle, but it's just something that, you know, we've been thinking about. How do we start to present a different view of the economy that we can find ourselves in and move toward, even as we're you know, making data intelligible in many different formats. So so that's our data fields work. And data agreements is you know, just trying to make life easier on ourselves, because oftentimes a group will gather data and then other people will be super interested and want to know, oh, like, what did you find out about this? And can we get your directory of that? And it gets to be a conversation with like all these different people, oftentimes for these grassroots groups that have, you know, very limited resources. And so how do we facilitate that conversation in a way that it's like not going to be, you know, a big rigmarole every time you want to use somebody else's data or share your own data. And then the third bucket of work that we work on is connecting and building the ecosystem. So one example of that is a project that we've been working on for the past several months, is gathering signatures for an open letter kind of / manifesto calling for cooperative digital infrastructure. And I say that's because we'd like to have nice things. And I will come back to this at the end of this session, because we should all have nice things. Just because we're trying to do things in a cooperative way does not mean that, you know, our stuff shouldn't be as user-friendly and slick and functional as the stuff that's offered by big corporations that otherwise do not have our best interests at heart. So this effort is a way to reach out to other groups that are interested in the cooperative and solidarity movements having nice things, because we build it for ourselves and because we are actually supporting the creation of the digital infrastructure that we as co-ops need. And I will touch a little bit on, like, you know, what you all should be demanding from groups like Food Co-op Initiative or National Cooperative Grocers. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's there already. It's so many resources that are great. And, you know, I think that they will respond to your request for like, hey, we need a template for this. We need an app for that. You know, none of you should be trying to build that stuff on your own, because it's tough. And the more you do it on your own, the less it'll be compatible with others and the less you'll be able to support each other. So that's kind of our message in general. So that is enough about us. Let's talk about you. Starting a food co-op requires a lot of data. And I would love to know if you want to come off mute and just shout out some ideas, like, what are some things that you all are doing that require data?
Member owner campaigns.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I'm going to throw
market study.
Market study. Excellent. Yes.
We have we're doing our community meeting in about a month, and we require the addresses of all of our neighbors. So
cool.
Again, that's in our village. A lot of data there.
So you need the addresses to send them invitations?
Yep.
I was thinking just all the marketing efforts in general, trying to find who we should be talking to and infinity groups and things of that sort.
Cool. So outreach, yes. Knowing who else is out there, what groups are already existing that may be compatible. Yes. Any other ideas?
I would add finding comps that fit our particular type of co-op,
Yes.
you know, in more of an urban setting to visit and get to know, and not necessarily in our own city, but if it requires travel too.
Yeah, so I sent out a little pre-survey and some of you responded, and having data that fits your context was like one of the major pain points that a lot of people pointed out. Cool. Well, thank you so much. You can go back on mute now.
You've got a bunch in the chat too. So
Oh, go
products
ahead.
members want to buy, revenue and
Yeah.
expenses, email, social media analytics, outreach event success, surveys, member owner surveys, data like pro formas and business plans. So yeah, we got quite a spread.
Actually, absolutely. So yeah, these are what I could think of. And again, I'm not a food co-op developer, but definitely, we heard about market and feasibility studies. What do you compare to? And it was interesting talking with both Rosemary and Anthony. They're always thinking about like, oh, and does the answer to all this add up to, do you have the pieces needed to run a successful co-op? And we'll get to that in a little bit. But certainly membership and capital drives. And then, somebody mentioned, which products should you buy? How should you promote them? How should you price them? These are all questions that require a lot of data. And I think that a lot of consumers want to know who the producers are. So possibly having traceability, or maybe just having, anecdotal information about your producer and being able to share that information with consumers. And, once you get going as a co-op, you definitely want to drive member participation. So whether that's, getting them onto committees or getting them to vote or getting them to respond to a survey, just knowing, when members are showing up and what are the best ways to keep them engaged. So this is certainly not an exhaustive list. I think, everything that you mentioned and more are reasons that a food co-op, and especially a startup food co-op, requires a lot of data. So allow me to get philosophical. You may not know this about me, but I am French. That means that I can wear a beret unironically and cue accordion music. I can also be philosophical. And so the word for data in French is donner, which literally means a given. And, we kind of have that concept in English as well, but it made me think about, okay, well, a given, that implies a relationship. The information has been given to you by someone. In that case, think about reciprocating, right? Don't just take what you need off, or take only what you need and offer something in return. There's I think a good philosophical practice in there. And then also, the French are very logical, or they like to think they are. So, the information that you are given may lead to a conclusion. Given X, then Y, so that's something that I think is important in any startup effort. So, the questions, and I think where you want to be going with that is, don't go looking for the answer that you want. You're all very passionate, but you need to temper that passion with a little dispassion, like just being dispassionate, really, well, that's what the numbers say. So I think that that's just a good philosophical approach to the data that you're looking at. And think about the questions that you're trying to answer with that data. Like, would a co-op be a solution to a problem in our community? And what exactly is that problem? Co-ops definitely succeed best when they are filling an unmet need. So that could definitely be food in general, but it could also be for a particular type of food, for access, for information, like we were talking about with the access to information about producers. So those are maybe the types of things that you need to be asking about. And you also need to be asking about what else exists in the community already, and how you can support those things that are existing. So I think somebody was saying, oh, what are the existing groups in our community? You definitely don't want to like compete with those groups. You know, you want to be saying, oh, what can we do that would strengthen what you're doing, and vice versa. So I think those are interesting questions for you to bear in mind as you're thinking about what information to gather. And then just saying, okay, well, what is it that can be given that answers these questions? And you know, some of the questions that came up when you know, I asked Rosemary and Anthony about like, okay, well, you know, what are some difficulties that sometimes arise when you're looking for questions, or looking to answer questions. One is like, you know, you were saying you have the addresses of your members and supporters to invite them to an event. Well, that's great. And you need to be looking at that geographically, because somebody may be a supporter, but you know, if they live far away and you're not in the kind of community where people have a habit of going very far out of their way to do their grocery shopping, you know, they may not be you know, a regular shopper. And so, you know, knowing about where people are located who are, you know, expressing interest is really important for figuring out the level of support in your community. And also, you know, you may be in an area where shoppers are seasonal. You know, it could be that they only come in the summer months. It could be that they only come in the winter months. You know, like what is the seasonality of shoppers? And that's something that's going to be really crucial to your business plan. Or you know, you may be in a college environment where the people that you're asking questions of now, the students, they're not going to be here in 4 years. So, you know, how do you figure that into your marketing? So those are all questions that come up that, you know, when you're looking for data, you need to be bearing in mind. So, so that's the questions you want to answer. Now let's figure out like, okay, where are you going to get all that data? And I could think of like two major buckets. You can either go to existing databases or you could ask people, right? And with existing databases, you're going to need to figure out, oh, is it free or is it costly? Do you need permission? Is it appropriate to your context? Are you going to be looking at things that are mostly rural or suburban when your context is urban? No, you need to be looking at something that that matches and is comparable. And you know, getting into the questions about how to make things more cooperative, is it possible for you to contribute information back? You know, can you say, oh, like we phoned that number and it was out of service, but then we found out that the actual number is such and such. You know, is it possible to improve the data that you receive? That's something that is a cooperative approach. Then when you're asking people, you know, a lot of you had questions about whether you can get the right relevant info. And that's, I think, a really great place to use your networks and your support organizations. You know, I have links that I can send out later where, you know, FCI has done a webinar on, you know, how to use a CRM program, you know, what should be in your customer relationship management or client or community relationship management. The C can stand for anything you want. But, you know, what are the things that you're trying to track? There's also good examples in the member equity toolbox on what information to collect from members, how to track it. And there's also good information in the Food Co-op Startup Guide. So you probably know all that stuff already, but I just wanted to remind people that you do not need to reinvent the wheel. Remember, we are stronger together, and there are networks and there are support organizations that have figured some of this stuff out. And where you run into a gap, that is a great place to reach out and say, hey, why is there not a template for this? Why is there not, you know, something that I can download for that? You know, please get on it. And I think, you know, the folks who are trying to support you would be delighted to hear that that is something that you need. But when you're asking people, you know, we all, I think, are suffering these days from like multiple, you know, satisfaction survey-itis or whatever. You know, every time you turn around, your gas station wants to know, did you have a great experience? You know, you went to the dentist and like, how was that? And, you know, it can be a little bit overwhelming, all the different, you know, questions. You can't look at a website without a little pop-up saying, so, you know, was this article helpful? It's a little annoying, right? And so, you know, think about how to ask people in a way that's not annoying, you know, and we're all people, so, you know, we can relate. Some questions you may get better answers from asking people to volunteer and be in a focus group, you know, and then you can give them a muffin and they can hang out with each other and it can be pleasant. And they don't have to fill out yet another survey. So that's something to think about. And you know, when you store people's data, I'll have a little bit more about personal identifying information. You know, be careful with it. But you know, you don't want to necessarily, you know, have somebody's identifying information with the stuff that's actually interesting to you for a particular question that you're trying to answer. And, you know, we want to be reciprocal. So what do people get out of answering? You know, is there a way that, you know, you can track people's participation in stuff and like, you know, if they answer so many times, like maybe they get, you know, I don't know, a coupon or a discount or a cookie or whatever, something that's pleasant, or even a shout out at your member meeting. But, you know, just recognizing that the act of answering your questions is you know, something that people are doing out of the goodness of their hearts, and they should get something in return. And you know, one other consideration when you're trying to answer questions is it a question where what's really interesting is not a snapshot of it, but how it changes over time. So I think food co-ops in particular, like they might be thinking about employee satisfaction, and the same thing in worker co-ops. Like in employee satisfaction, it's hard to get a real read on something just from a one shot, you know, one moment in time survey, but you can start to get a sense of how things are going, or you know, whether your efforts are paying off, you know, in some particular domain, if you do the same questions, you know, regularly, like every year or every 2 years, and that you get, that's, you know, it's over a length of time, so it's called longitudinal, but it's one of the things that you need to be thinking about is like, oh, is this a question that, you know, I only care about it now, and you know, that's fine, or this is a question that I want to know, how does this change over time? In which case I should ask it in a way that I can ask it again, you know, with some regularity, and be thinking ahead for the next time that you're going to want to ask it. Okay, so that was a lot. I'm just going to pause right there in case people have questions, or like particular things that they are interested in based on that.
I do have a question in the chat. Dina from Chicago Market shares, how can we ensure that those who are answering our questions are a good enough size representation of our audience community ownership base? So the concern that you get a bunch of answers, but you know, a lot of us in co-op world, we get answers from the same small group of people, and it's not really representing the whole community we're trying to serve.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. So I think, you know, one thing to do is before you ask the questions, get a sense of like, all right, you know, what are the different groups of people that we know about in the community that we want to serve, and be sure, and you know, be sure that folks that are in your community that you want to serve, you know, maybe are part of your steering committee and stuff like that, so they can, you know, definitely say like, oh, well, if you want answers from these people, you need to be showing up in these spaces, or you need to be showing up with these messengers, or you need to be showing up whatever. So like, you know, that way you actually have, you know, a sense of like, who are the groups out there, and then if you're getting your data back and you're checking like, okay, well, which of these groups are people, you need to know that, and that way when you look at it you say, oh, we've only heard from these two groups and not from these other groups, we need to make another effort. So there's like, pre-planning, then there's checking, and then there's like doing outreach. In terms of the actual numbers, I mean, statistics is like this bottomless rabbit hole of how precisely you can slice how confident you can be about something. So I'm not gonna, say what that is, but like a group of 30 people can be representative. It's not like you need to necessarily have hundreds and hundreds. It just depends on like, what they're representative of and what you're trying to find out, and also the degree of confidence that you need. So it's a very variable answer. I don't know if that was helpful at all. I hope so.
Don't see any other questions in the chat, but people should feel free to add them. Well, we've got this pause if you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I will move on, and if other questions come up, you can just let me know, JQ. All right. So, this is kind of why I am talking about cooperative, about data. How can your approach to data be more cooperative? So some of the things that I thought of that, we think about in the Data Commons that could apply to you is, be more targeted. And we've mentioned this, think about what you really need to know and ask and collect that, not just every possible thing, I know we live in a world of big data where, every time your eyes move from one place to another on your screen, somebody's clocking that, but that's not necessarily how you want to be approaching your collection of data. So being targeted. And people are rightfully kind of concerned about PII, personal identifying information data. So I'm gonna just explain this for a little bit because I personally didn't know that much about it, and here's what I've learned. So personal identifying information is something that basically will allow some bad actor out there to impersonate you, and to get your friends to think that they're his friends, or give them money, or get into your bank account, or take out a loan, or whatever, all these sorts of very unpleasant things that could happen if somebody can pretend that they are you. And it's not super easy. I mean, it is actually frighteningly easy to identify who somebody is. Generally speaking, to do real harm, you need to know things like a person's date of birth or social security number. Those are not pieces of information that you need from your members. So don't collect them. Like, don't be like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we like celebrated people's birthdays? No. Maybe their month, but even then, like, one of the things that's a little bit scary is that people can take very disparate bits of data from different parts of the online world and put them together. So, you post a photo on Facebook and you're like, oh, I had such a great time at my 40th birthday party. And then like people are like, ta-ting, now I know like when that person's birthday is. So that's something to kind of be a little bit mindful of. And it's interesting, the person who was collecting the street address, that's great when you actually do need to send out an invitation. It's not necessarily something that you need, just as you're trying to figure out feasibility. Maybe you just need a zip code or a neighborhood neighborhood or something that's like less identifying. But certainly when you start to collect things like a street address, you want to be using a system that's encrypted and that's hard to get it to, and having ways to work with that with the people involved in your effort, so that they know not to like leave their laptop lying around or not have a password, or any of these sort of basic data hygiene things. So when you're getting ready to open the store, and go to either Food Co-op Initiative or National Co-op Grocers, and they will tell you a list of point of sale systems that do the job and are are reliable. Like, don't buy something that could be made by, I don't know, hackers halfway around the world. Just because it's cheap does not mean that it would be a good product for you to use. So those are things to be mindful of. And we can definitely talk more about PII. There's like reams of information about it, but I think that those are some of the basics. This is like more in the Data Commons realm of what we do. But if you do come up, well, first try not to come up with your own stuff. Like, try to share by using the templates, standards, agreements, whatever that other co-ops have already developed, or that your support organizations have thought of. But if something is missing and you do come up with one of your own, tell people, say, hey, we didn't have a template for finding out about people's dietary preferences in this way. Now we do. This works really well. Our members love it. So everyone should feel free to use it. And I think that's a cooperative approach to how we want to gather data cooperatively, cooperate with each other. And if somebody shares information with you, that's great. Be mindful of the agreement that you sign with them. Like, first of all, say like, hey, let's come to an agreement about what I can do with this, and then abide by that agreement. Or if, as you're collecting data from people, you say, we're not going to share this information, or we'll only share it with your permission, abide by that. I almost feel silly saying this out loud, but it does just seem like in the world that we live in, people kind of check things off willy-nilly, and it's I think it's important to be mindful of what you're agreeing to and what you're asking people to agree to, and to also then fulfill those agreements. So I think it is a more cooperative thing to do that. Yeah.
We've got some comments that I think is interesting. Just that Chef Cassandra is sharing that her startup, they don't actually track any owner information other than zip codes, no demographics, because they feel they can get all the information they really need from the zip codes, and people do not like the prying into sensitive information like income, government assistance, benefits, that sort of thing. So that and that's true. Some communities, it's much more sensitive to ask for that data. So I think she just wanted to throw that out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then so I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, like startup food co-ops and the level of data they're collecting. Does that make sense to you, sticking to that level? Or
I mean, I think if that's what is important in your community, then absolutely you should stick to that. I mean, I think it's definitely a question that a food co-op developer might have a more detailed answer to, but I think especially as you're just doing market feasibility studies, then yeah, zip code is fine. You can look up what the demographics of a particular zip code are, and make inferences from that. I mean, again, like we were talking about, how sure are you that it's that? Well, there's a certain level of like, well, we're guessing, but you're going to be guessing about lots of things. So you know, if it's your best guess, great. This is your best guess.
And Heather, do you want to unmute and share your question? Or I can share for you. So I'm gonna pause here and see if you want to.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. So we have, I mean, we are a food co-op, I guess. We're 100% volunteer run. So, I think in comparison to a lot of folks, we might almost be considered a buying club. But at any rate, so because we're 100% volunteer run, our budget is extraordinarily small. And so we just have this one Google account, where we just pretty much manage all of our files. And so we maintain our membership, I guess, quote unquote, database using an Excel spreadsheet. And so we have members' names, their addresses and phone numbers, and, you know, like how long they've been with the co-op, et cetera. I mean, I've long been kind of, we've talked about, like, I've been a little nervous that, you know, this is the only way that, you know, it's just supposedly Google is fairly a secure site. But in your opinion, is that okay? Or should we be, you know, spending some money to have a more secure database of our members?
Okay, so I'm no expert, and you should probably ask somebody who knows better, but my sense is that that's probably not secure. I mean, Google's in everything, and people who are looking for hackable data can get into it. So that said, you may have access to things that are more secure, that are not expensive. So I think that, you know, I think it would be worth, I don't know, asking a local small business development center or community college that are, you know, great resources for the community, like what's available that we could use. And you won't necessarily need to pay money or a lot of money to have something that is less open to being misused.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Some other things, you know, I think when I was talking about your sources of data and, you know, whether you're getting it from a database or a person, you know, think about what information can you give as well as get. You know, how can you report back? Like, these are our findings. You know, it can be aggregate data, or like, you know, I think people like to sort of see the results of data gathering and like, oh, this is so interesting to see where I fit in, or what we as a community look like. So that's always something to bear in mind. Oh, and sorry, I forgot that this was my next slide. So this is something that I wanted to share with you. It's possibly a peek into the future, but it's an app that is in Denmark, and it's in this thought about giving info as well as getting. It's an app that co-op members can use, and it gives them, you know, a way to make a shopping list or a way to get deals or discounts on things that they use very often, or a way to get more information about, you know, a particular product. So it's unfortunately all in Danish, but just the little sort of Google Play Store had these little thumbnails that I thought would be fun to share. And when I had first heard about it, you know, about a year ago, you know, I thought, oh, this is just something that's in Denmark. But then it turned out, as I was searching, that I found a very, very similar app that is in the UK. So this is a co-op app, and it's co-op membership rewards app. So not only can you do shopping and get news and stuff like that, but they have an ability to support a local charitable cause. You know, so it's a way to kind of these are the nice things that I was mentioning earlier. Like, why can't our shopping experience be nice? while also, being in line with our cooperative values. So when we build things together, these are the kinds of things that we can have, which I think is exciting. And it also turns out that National Co-op Grocers has come out with an app as well. So I think it's still fairly new, so I don't have pictures of it, but I am excited to see that the same idea of like, oh, we can have nice things as long as we work together to put them together, is taking hold in the co-op community here as well. So that is all that I had prepared, and I would love to just take the last 10 minutes or so for questions if folks have any questions or some further things that they'd like to discuss.
All right. And folks can throw that in the chat, or are you comfortable? Did you want to people throw in the chat, or did you want people unmute?
I'm perfectly happy if people want to unmute and say something that they were interested in.
Okay. And people were asking if you were going to share, there was a way to contact you. That one, Kim.
You know what? I did not make one of those nice last slides.
That's okay. I will get your contact information and put it in the chat so you can focus on questions.
Sure.
Right. Let's see. I see something new in the chat. So yeah, Dana, why don't you just why don't you go ahead and unmute and share some of this?
Sure. So I wanted to ask specifically about DE&I metrics, specifically because we just created a recent strategic plan around DE&IJ, and that's because we know we need to be really intentional with our actions, and we want to make an impact in the community that's just and equitable. We want to make sure that we know who we're serving and how we're serving them and what their needs are and all those good things. But even just trying to determine the diversity on our board, we have to rely on the other board members saying that they represent female or that they, represent BIPOC or whatever. And we don't ask any of those kinds of questions of our ownership base. So right now, we have, for example, I think 20% BIPOC and maybe 30% female on our board. We have no way of knowing if that's representative of our entire ownership base. So I'm wondering how we respectfully and legally collect that kind of data related to race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, veteran status, all of those things, so that we actually know the diversity or the representation in our ownership base versus demographics we might be able to get from census information on our community and that sort of thing.
Thanks so much for that question, Dana. I think it's a really tough thing that a lot of people are facing. I mean, I guess it brings up a lot of questions for me, which is like, would you try to change the makeup of your board if you found out that your membership was a different makeup, or not? Is one question. Another question that I have is, I think representation is like a really hard to pin down concept. I think that, we have electoral representation and people can have candidates and vote for them and feel represented that way. But I feel like in the context of, what is the co-op doing that makes life better for the entire community and for every segment of the community, representation is not necessarily like it could get you there or not get you there, depending on how well the person is representing. And so it's not a panacea. It's like it's an imperfect proxy, I guess, for are you actually doing the things that would be beneficial to every segment. I I'm not against representation. I just think that it's an incomplete answer to the actual question, which is, are we doing the things? And so, yeah, I guess that's what I would say is, like, I wouldn't necessarily worry so much about the actual numbers in your membership unless unless you're definitely like falling short of representing your community, or, and this is like the most annoying thing, there's a particular grant that requires that you be serving, you know, some number or some percentage of people that fit in a certain segment. And in that case, you know, there I would maybe ask, you know, the nonprofit resources that are in your area, you know, the foundations should be held responsible for helping you. Like, if they care about a certain demographic segment, then they should be the ones saying, this is the way to ask. Like, this is the way to ask that, you know, serves the purpose of actually helping this segment of people. And if they don't know how to answer that question, then, you know, that's, I think, significant that they're just doing it for show too. And they're not actually looking to benefit that particular segment. Forgive me if I sound a little bit combative about that.
No, that's totally fair. That's totally fair. I think it is a combination of a lot of things that you were saying. Right now, we have no idea the diverse makeup of our ownership base because we just have never asked. And so when people say, well, do you represent the community? We have no way of answering that because we don't know the data, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
without a store to see people walking in and so forth, it's hard to know.
Yeah, you have to rely on assumptions, which are not the right thing to do in this kind of a situation.
Yeah, well, I feel your pain.
We've got about 2 more minutes if folks have other topics, questions.
Could I add a small voice to the conversation, JQ?
Janet, you are always welcome. You know that.
Thank you. About knowing our community, and it's something Fertile Ground is working on too. It's knowing, creating relationships. That's one thing well, one of many things I think that makes us very different being a cooperative is that we sort of know who we are, we know who we serve. So however you can do that, get to know your membership, then you can have a better idea of who you're representing from the standpoint of members. And that can be dinners, it can be meetings, it can be phone calls, it can be all of those things that help us create relationship. It's not totally scientific, as you would say. It's kind of more qualitative than quantitative, but it gives us an idea of who we're serving. And it's a small portion of what we could do, but that's another way. And Fertile Ground is working on that too. So we're in the same boat. Thanks, JQ.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, as Tina said, that was a great reminder. And I think very true. Any other comments, questions before we wrap up today? Okay. Well, what we're going to do then is we're going to wrap up. Now, some of y'all like to wait until after the actual session and the recording is over, and then you've got more detailed questions for our speaker. Our speaker has said they can stay a few minutes if anyone wants to stay after and discuss their particular situation or question in more depth. But we're going to go ahead and get wrapped up for this session. And so thank you so much to Noemi for being here, for sharing with us. This topic has been one you guys have been asking for forever. We are so grateful to her and to the Data Commons Cooperative for joining us today. And I want to again thank our FCI Live champion sponsors for making today possible. We have coming up today, still tonight, is Building Justice, Envisioning White-Led Startups with Patrice Lockhart Anthony of Black Label Consulting and Coaching. If you've ever seen Patrice speak on racial equity and food co-ops, you know this is what she's good at. Those of you who have registered, I just sent out this morning an article in advance that she recommends you read before you join us tonight. We hope to see you there. There is still time to register for that one. And then tomorrow, again, high demand topic, how to thrive in a small town. We're going to talk to 2 food co-ops that are in truly rural, what I call rural communities. We're not talking 30,000. We're talking, 2,000, 1,000, maybe even less than 1,000 people, definitely under 5,000, and how their co-ops, how they're different, how they serve their communities, how that works for those of you who are in rural communities organizing food co-ops. And then we have Don Moffitt and Sarah Leberts from Culluminate coming back with Searching for Financial Feasibility. If you've taken this one before, I would still take it again. If you haven't, we're really glad they're coming and doing this session again. It's a critical one. If you have a board member who is just joining the party and is learning about what it means to find financial feasibility, send them to this one. So again, thank you to our FCI Live sponsors for making everything possible today. And thank you to you all for being here.